This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers. Join us as we interview creators, discuss our favorite horror, and share original spooky stories. I'm Jeff C. Carter, and this week we're talking about Punk Goes Horror, a new anthology from Trueborn Press. Returning guest William Sterling is an author, editor, podcaster, screenwriter, and now apparently an actor. He's the author of the novels String Them Up and Dead Men's Chests, with shorter work in multiple anthologies, including the Stoker Khan-aligned charity anthology, Shadows in the Stacks. He hosts the Killer Mediums podcast. He is also a recurring member of the Red Wall read-along podcast, Books and Badgers. His first short film, Candy, is in post-production. Shannon Riley, she, her, is a writer and therapist who, as a teen, wrote gore starring her friends and family instead of doing math homework. She's the author of the body horror revenge novella, Pocket Knife Kitty. Her short fiction has appeared in the Dark Bloom's Girls Coming of Age Horrors anthology and in Ghoulish Tales magazine. She lives with her husband and 2 daughters in a medium-ish suburb outside of Pittsburgh. Kayli Scholz, she, her, is a horror author living and writing in the wilds of Florida. She's the author of Saint Grit, Black Rain Season, Yeehaw Junction, and various short stories. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Thanks so much for having us.
It's nice to be here. Thank you.
Since we have a panel here, starting with William, first scary movie and first concert.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, how do I tell the shortest version of this story? The first scary movie was Signs. I was at a middle school sleepover. My parents, very conservative household, didn't like horror movies, so I didn't really get access to it. So my first real exposure to horror movies was in middle school. So everybody was making fun of me to start with. And then that thing knocked my socks off. I was not prepared for the scene where the green guy walks past in the birthday party.
What you're about to see may disturb you.
Move, children! Vámonos!
I don't think I literally pooped myself, but I might have. First concert, I'm going to give you kind of a 2-part answer here. Technically, my first concert was a Reliant K concert at Six Flags. Went with some friends, and it was just happening at the end of the night, and we just didn't leave. So like, hey, a concert, cool, let's go see what this is about. So then my idiot self goes back to school after that. Like, I've been to a concert. I know what this is all about.
Shut up, William. You haven't even seen a scary movie.
Right. And the girl I liked was like, hey, I'm going to go to a concert at the Masquerade this weekend. It's a band called Haste the Day, and Scary Kids Scaring Kids is opening for them. You want to come with me? And I was like, sure, of course. I know concerts. They are like hardcore, like mosh pit, throw yourselves against the wall. Nobody leaves without a busted lip, and just getting punched in the face the second the first power chord hit was incredible. And it was like, oh, this is an actual concert. And I have been on the juice ever since.
Yeah, I can't blame him. I would probably punch you in the face as soon as you step in the pit as well. Kayli, how about yourself?
So punchable.
First scary movie, first concert.
First scary movie would have to be Poltergeist, Spielberg's Poltergeist, the original. I think I saw that when I was probably about 5 years old. My mother had it on the TV, and I was really captivated by it. I don't know if it scared, that movie in particular scared me, but that was definitely my intro into the genre. First concert was, I saw Tracy Chapman when I was 10 years old at a folk music festival outside of Birmingham.
Wow, very nice. Classing up the podcast. Shannon, how about yourself?
I so wish that I had a really good answer for what was the first horror movie I came into consciousness over. But the answer is truly that I don't know, because I was watching scary movies when I was old enough to watch any movies. My mom was a part of the Stephen King fan club, and every month she got a Stephen King book in the mail. And so I was growing up with that being like what is this month's Stephen King book coming in? I would ask her to read them to me as I fell asleep at nighttime. So there was just a baseline culture of like every third movie in the household that anyone watched was a scary movie. So I don't remember, but I remember like the 90s horror being such a huge part of growing up. Obviously, like Scream was in there. Like the ones that people don't even, I think, talk about a lot. Like I remember Urban Legend being really big for me when I was a kid. Yeah, okay, yeah, okay. You guys get it. And then like the I Know You Did Last Summers and The Faculty was really huge for me. So that whole era, I don't remember what of those all came first. My first concert, I can't remember which one. I think I just have like I think I blocked out a lot of my childhood because I don't remember when things happened. But I feel like it was either Hanson or Kiss.
That's a spectrum right there.
I feel like, I think my answer that I always give is Hanson. So that's the one that I'm going to go with. I think it's a funnier and better answer.
They're both pretty wild. On a personal note, for movie night, we recently rewatched The Faculty, and that movie fucking rips. It holds up. The cast is so insane. Like, you cannot believe how star-studded the cast is, how great the script is, with the exception of like a little bit of CG, a lot of practical effects, so it still holds up. The burnouts do speed for the win. Like, it's all about doing drugs to fight monsters.
Now what the hell's wrong with him? Nothing's wrong with him, you asshole. He's tweaking. Let him fucking tweak.
So good.
Yeah.
They don't make them like that anymore.
Love it.
Yeah. For me, like eras of horror films, it's like I've yet to find, like, it's like 70s and then that 90s to 2000s cusp era. Like, those are the two eras that I don't think we've ever been able to get back to.
I would put a pretty big chunk of the 80s in there as well.
Every era has their good horror, for sure. There was a good shock factor to the 70s that I feel like we haven't been brave enough to really get back to.
The 70s was a time of deep unrest and psychic pain, and it erupted in horror in really shocking ways. But the 80s had some master filmmakers, and the field of practical effects really evolved and sort of came into its own. When it had that phase shift into the 90s, CG was almost there, and so people were kind of forcing into everything. And a lot of those 90s movies, with the exception of Scream and stuff like that just used classic gore and blood effects, anything with CG really ages poorly. In a way, like Fright Night or Exorcist.
Fright Night.
Yeah.
Talking about CG. I'm talking about The Frighteners. That truly may have been one of my first early quote scary movies I remember watching growing up. So that took that off track, but I misremembered what movie you were talking about.
No, Frighteners is a banger.
Is Michael J. Fox in that?
That's right.
Am I remembering that correct? Oh my God. I've seen that movie since the 90s. Wow. Okay. I do remember it. Yeah.
But you can't go from 70s to 90s and leave out the 80s. That's an insane thing to say, Shannon. I'm sorry. I know not only 90s kids remember.
Wait, you're putting words in my mouth. I'm not negating the 80s. I'm just picking two of my favorite eras. The 80s are totally great.
You realize chronologically the 80s fall between the 70s and the 90s, right?
Oh my God.
And you're like, oh yeah, and also the 80s, I guess, the best decade
God.
our civilization has ever produced. But, whatever. Hanson ass concert goer. All right, sorry. I believe the Red Bull is now kicking in. So, William, over 100 episodes ago, you and I got together on a little podcast called We Bleed Orange and Black. It was episode 24. Do you have any updates since then?
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh my gosh, what is it now? We're 2 novels deeper in the bibliography. We've got an anthology with some really cool authors in it under the belt now. We've got a couple more things kind of lined up in the future, and we're dabbling in screenwriting for some reason because I don't have enough on my plate. Which of those do you want to talk about?
Let's talk about the short film.
So I've got some friends here in Atlanta that are starting they're calling it the Apex Film Collective. Effectively, they had a director in the friends group, and they had a cinematographer in the friends group, and they had a sound and lighting guy in the friends group, and just like everything they needed to make stuff. So they pooled their resources, they put everything under one roof, and they're reaching out and trying to find things to film and projects to get attached to. But as like a proof of concept thing, they wanted to go out and shoot something. So I was friends with the director guy. So he said, hey, do you have a Halloween-y short story that we could turn into a film? And it was like, no, but I can make something. So went through, wrote a script called Candy, and it's this very, very thin concept. Guy isn't giving out candy on Halloween night, and like the manifestation of Halloween itself comes and cuts him down.
Spoilers.
It was a cool excuse to just do one of every kind of scare. We've got a body horror moment. We've got a thing in the background moment. We've got a jump scare moment, just like playing around with it all and seeing how it landed. And it was so fun. And then about halfway through production, we realized we hadn't hired anybody to actually be the man in the mask. So we bought a scarecrow costume and I made my acting debut. Yeah, running around killing a bunch of my best friends for a like semi-professional looking thing. It was cool.
That was very cool. What is it like to watch horror now that you've been on the other side of the lens?
So much the same. It's weird. I feel like it didn't discolor anything. It just gave me a deeper appreciation for everything. Like there's just these standard shots in movies, like a camera zooming through a peephole or something like that you just kind of take at face value when you're watching it. But when you've been on a set and you've seen the director and the cinematographer fighting with that freaking peephole for an hour straight, you're like, that must have sucked to get. Kudos to them for pulling it off. Like, that is so complicated. Yeah, it hits different.
We are here to talk about this anthology. Can you tee it up for us by just talking about the submissions call?
So Punk Goes Horror is an anthology of musically inspired horror short stories. The open call and the initial concept for it was that I was looking for a bunch of punk or punk adjacent songs to inspire a short story. And that might be that the horror authors got inspired by the lyrics of the song, or just the general vibes of the song, or the way that the song made them feel when they listened to it or are listening to it now, or whatever. It was a very loose concept for an anthology. But I cast that out into the void. Tons of really cool authors came forward, including Kayli and Shannon. Submitted some stories, and then as I'm reading through, we got like 125 submissions through the open call. As I was reading through it, there were some stories that I read it and it just clicked. Like reading Shannon and Kayli's stories are perfect examples of this. Reading stories that I never would have come up with on my own, but they just make so much sense when you go through them and you listen to the song. Shannon's story, Box Full of Sharp Objects, is this super slickly written, dangerous feeling story where you can feel your mind unraveling as you go through it. And it hits so much like all of these different The Used songs do. Where there's just this level of polish and sheen on the songs, and they're not grungy, and there's not a lot of grit to the songs. They sound kind of like glamour pop almost. And then you dig into the lyrics, and you're like, oh, this is really fucked up what I'm listening to right here. Her story reads the same way, and it was like, she took the song, she made a story out of it. This is it. She did it. And same with Kayli's. Kayli's story is just bonkers and out there. All Hands on the Bad One, like Slater Kinney, I don't know, strikes a chord, and that sounds so dumb to say out loud. That like absurdist, cosmic, like I don't even know what box to try to put your story in, Kayli. It just reads so much like that song does. And we got a couple of those submissions in. And on top of just being good reflections of the songs, there's like this righteous anger through line between all of them. There's this push back against the world and what the world expects from you through all of them. Kind of this anarchical sentiment that punk music embodies so well. The vibes are immaculate. I'm going to try to leave it there.
Perfect. There's 15 stories. Kayli, since William teed you up so beautifully there, can you tell us a bit about All Hands on the Bad One, the song, the band, and the story?
Yeah, so the song that I chose, All Hands on the Bad One, is a song by Slater Kinney. They are a punk band from Olympia, Washington. Before there was even heard about the Punk Goes Horror Call, I had been writing a story about fandom, particularly about fans at shows. I attended a lot of shows last year, and I really wanted to play with that. So it's like I had a skeleton of, okay, want to write about fans. So let's explore that. And I had this idea for a story called Dog Breath, which I'm still currently writing. That is more or less the serious take on All Hands on the Bad One. With that particular story, I was experimenting with some bizarro absurdity, I guess you would call it rocksploitation genre. I just kind of grew the story out from that. It's like play with it, be as weird as possible. So the story is about this punk band named Female Trouble, and this amateur investigator that decides to get to the bottom of why they're so popular and why their fans get so excited during a live show. It's silly and goofball. And, the fringes of the story is about gatekeeping and fandom, like I said, and anti-establishment and that kind of thing.
It follows this investigator who embeds themselves in the band, is sort of leery of the band and their fans. And then in the crowd, in the audience, in the fan base, you have all these gatekeepers, but your main character is also a gatekeeper. Am I correct in thinking that she doesn't trust this punk band because they're too good and too popular?
Yeah, 100%. You've got that. I mean, I think too, the actual song, not my story, but the actual song, All Hands on the Bad One, is very much about hypocrisy and contradictions, gray areas of, our narrator, Don Pudding, this investigator, is very much, she's a fan herself, and yet she's a gatekeeper, just playing with that.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in with Carson Winter's story, Bastards of Young. William, can you give me some background on the song and the band?
Bastards of Young is a song by The Replacements. It's kind of old school punk, and even labeling it punk kind of feels odd because they're not the Ramones, they're not the Clash, they're a very straight-laced punk band as far as punk bands go. So in Carson's story, when he wrote this thing, the whole thing is about this wannabe reporter. There's a bunch of reporters in this anthology, now that I'm thinking about it. But there's this wannabe reporter that moves to a new city. He's trying to get into the local music scene, and at a show, he sees this group of never-do-wellers called the Bastards. They wear leather jackets, they run through the crowd, they start beating people up seemingly at random, and not like mosh pit beating them up, but like beating them up until they get kicked out of the concert. And this investigator decides to follow the Bastards out into the world to see what they're all about. And I'm going to stop it there. But it is a horror story that progresses from that sort of a setup. Having a protagonist that's he comes across as very straight-laced. He comes across as like having his life together, kind of like the Replacements kind of have that vibe. And watching them spiral down the path of punkdom, it all fit very well. And then there's a bunch of ties in with the lyrics too.
Well, it's interesting knowing Carson a little bit, is that this is like an aging punk fan who's trying to rekindle his youth, and he feels so out of touch with the scene. And he's like, okay, I bet these crust punks are exactly what I need to sort of get in touch with the youths. It's very much about that timeless but short-lived punk aggression. It burns out so fast, but it never goes away. It's just in every generation. And I really loved that it was a story about that very specific thing that still had a twist and still pulled off horror. Shannon, can you tell us about the band, the song, and the story, A Box Full of Sharp Objects?
The Box Full of Sharp Objects was written by The Used. They were formed in 2000. They're from Utah, I think Salt Lake City area, and they've been consistently making music for 25 years. They're actually doing like a 25th year tour this spring. So I'm very excited about that. The birth of the story itself, it starts way before the actual call. It's actually really funny. Kayli, you sort of mentioned something about how you were sort of working on something else Bantam related. That was like a story that you were. I have a really similar experience to that. Starting last spring, I've been working on like a second book that is very much so about the punk scene. Like the characters are in a band. I spent all of spring and last summer really, really entrenched in the world of music and touring. And I have friends who are in bands, and I travel a lot to shows, and I'm always very, very involved in the music scene, local and not so local. And I spent a lot of time this past year really dedicating a lot of energy to writing a story about a band, and most specifically like a lead singer of a band, and like the horrible elements that I'm going to do to him in the story that I'm writing. And so I had been working on that for quite a while. And then I happened upon this call, which was, I was already living in that. I was already living in writing about music and listening to hardcore music and punk music to kind of live in that. So when this came up, I remember turning to everyone in my life that I know personally and saying, if I don't get into this anthology, you'll never see me ever again. It was the most important thing for me because I was like, nothing has been more creative for me than this, which is of course a ridiculous thing to say. Immediately, I dove into like my playlist and I said, I have to find the perfect song. But also I was very aware that only one song from each band was being, so I didn't want to go like too mainstream, although they used not like an underground band or anything. But I wanted to kind of avoid some like the big time bands. So I just spent a couple of days listening to a bunch of playlists and albums and music that I was familiar enough with that I could get a really good image of what story could come from that, and that I wouldn't mind listening to over and over again as I was sort of percolating on the story. And when I came across Box Full of Sharp Objects, it was already a song that I love and know by a band that I really love, and the song, is something that I could listen to over and over again. I was pulling up lyrics and reading them, and as I was reading the lyrics, I kept seeing like this theme of like a dangerous love and maybe like taking risks with that, and there being like a violent underpinning to whatever is happening between like these characters. And so that sort of started opening up, okay, well, what if I write a love story, but I create this story with these characters on this like bed of violence, and say, what could I write about two characters who are experiencing less about love, but more about like maybe obsession and how dangerous that can be, and then making them young. So I have, the only two characters in the story are a girl and a guy, in high school age. I mean, they're young enough that their, mom would drop them off someplace and they'd have a book bag that they'd be carrying in a scene. So these vaguely young people who enter this sort of arrangement of obsession and this game of how much would you give somebody if you really believed you were in love with them, and how much could you take from somebody if you also believed you were in love with them. And at what point, how far could you take that before you couldn't take it any further?
This story was very visceral, very unhygienic. I loved the role reversal. I think in any other era, this would be a story about what the boy is taking from the girl or how vulnerable she can be. And switching it was really interesting. And at that sweaty teenage romance age they were at was perfect. Dark things going on in the basement after mom drops you off, just really, really great. I mean, just the stuffiness and like how sweaty and smelly and dark and dank and hot and muggy it was down there. Oh, yeah. That one had all the feels.
Yeah, thank you. I thought the story only made sense with like a female. I don't want to necessarily say protagonist, but we're more closely in her head. I thought that it would make the story more interesting, less expected, and less tragic, having a non-traditional victim, I suppose.
William, you can either pick a story to present to us, or I have a random number generator. Spin the wheel?
Spin the wheel!
Spin
Spin the wheel! Spin the wheel!
Okay, the number I have is 11.
Okay.
Yeah, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11. All hands on the bad one. Okay, we're spinning it again. Okay, number 3 gives us Kids of the Black Hole.
Oh, Max.
Nice.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I love that one. I love their story.
Instead of talking about this story super directly, I'll talk a little bit about the submissions process, because we've hit on a couple of things here already. When we did the submissions, I did have that thing built into the open call about I'm only going to pick one story per band. So we got so many Nirvana submissions for some reason. I guess there was a Nirvana anthology that fell through in the recent past, so a bunch of people recycled those stories.
That tracks.
Whatever. There was a lot of Nirvana. There was a lot of Blink-182. But I was trying to do all of this only knowing two things about the story. One, what is the song's name? And two, what is the band's name? So Kids of the Black Hole comes in by The Adolescents. Scrub who wrote it. Put that to the side for a second. Okay, I'm not super familiar with them. I'm going to go back. I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to listen to the song before I read the story. The songs are awesome. It is so cool. It is this really well orchestrated old school punk song that builds on itself, and it's not just 60 seconds of rush energy. It's very intentionally composed, as much as punk songs get. So it had me already. I'm hooked from the start. This is a new band to me. This is a new song. I'm excited. I started reading it, and it is so much stuff that I wanted to include in this anthology somewhere. It's trans lives matter. It's anti-authority. It's standing up for yourself. It's sort of kind of found family. Like if somebody is being cruel and abusive towards us, you can go out into the world and you can find your own path, and you don't need to shackle yourself to people that are being cruel to you. It's so many things. And about halfway through the story, it starts taking this cool, cosmic, again, a little bit absurdist twist to it. And it was like, I know who wrote this. And if I don't know who wrote this, I know who they've published stories through previously. So got to the end of it, and it was one of those, just like you put it at the top of the pile, it's in, it doesn't really matter what else I read here. We're finding a way to fit this thing in. So I went ahead and let myself look, and it's Max Booth III. Ghoulish books, it is a very ghoulish story. It is a very Max Booth story. It hits the song so well. It's got this awesome message that, like you were saying earlier, things going wrong in the basement when people aren't there to supervise. Man, I just love it so much. And if you're gonna write a story about a black hole, it's got to be cosmic, right?
I think by definition. Can you tell us about the cover art?
The cover art kind of has two elements coming together. Christina Osborne and I from Trueborn Press reached out to Ira Rat. Ira's got a very punk aesthetic, kind of a minimalist approach to art styles, and just kind of bounced ideas around with them for a while about, if we're doing a punk goes horror thing, what would that look like from your perspective? And Ira ended up coming to us with the logo that we used. So then we've got this really cool sticker logo. We can make patches out of this. We can make stickers. We can do all sorts of cool stuff with this thing. It's very punk, kind of a little bit of Goosebumps built into. I don't know. I love everything about it. But then we have 3 different stories in the anthology that are various shades and flavors of something goes wrong at a punk show and the bodies start hitting the floor. So talking to Christina about that, it felt like a very tangible image to try to hold on to and to try to project as this is what's inside this anthology, is a bunch of people moshing together, and clearly something is wrong, but we're not totally sure what on the cover. And Christina came back and was just like, I got you, hang on. And she whipped it up, and I think she found 6 or 7 different concert scenes and just mutilated all of them. It was like, which one are we going with? Cool. So we've got the blurry, screaming, moshing bodies on the front with Ira's super clean sticker logo right on top of it.
And in the lower right-hand corner, you can see William getting blasted in the face at his first concert.
Right? Somebody's just decking me.
Yeah.
No, we should have worked that in. Punk 2.
Punk 2, yeah.
Sneak me into Punk 2's cover.
Punk 2, the Hanson anthology.
That's right.
All the time. Bop.
So let's shift gears. So now I'm going to ask you all for a Halloween treat. Can you recommend a book, movie, game, food, or experience, past or present, that puts you in the Halloween mood? Kayli, we're going to go to you first.
I really like this question. I was going to say, no, you know what my real answer is? Think. my real answer, it's a little weird. What puts me in the Halloween mood is the old 1980s and 1990s sitcom specials that used to have a Halloween episode. So like Roseanne, Boy Meets World, Family Matters, all of those old shows that as millennials we grew up watching. And, they would have the Halloween special. I still to this day rewatch those every October.
Tonight's episode of Family Matters is a little scary, so you might want to watch it with somebody brave.
Don't worry, Uncle Steve. Yeah, man, we're here for you.
Guys, can we turn on the lights?
That is fantastic. I've recently gotten into the Family Matters Halloween specials for the show because in our alternate format, we'll cover old horror TV. And I've never seen a non-Halloween episode of Family Matters, but boy, they go hard for Halloween. And I've loved every frame of it. The throwback to the Halloween and the Christmas specials.
The Christmas too, right?
The costumes on Roseanne were always top tier. When a ghost would show up on MacGyver, it would be like, oh my God, chocolate and peanut butter, my two favorite things, MacGyver and spooky stuff. Like,
right.
So good. William.
I'm cheating. I'm cheating here. You teed me up with this question like an hour ago before the recording even started, and I haven't come up with anything. So I'm going to default to cheesy 70s and 80s Halloween themed horror movies like, I don't know, Jeff, you might have heard of Hack-O-Lantern.
A little movie called Hack-O-Lantern. That's not cheating at all. That's, in fact, a test, and you passed. Sorry, Kayli. The only answer is Hack-O-Lantern. Shannon, now you know. The only answer I will accept is Hack-O-Lantern.
Play to the crowd. Play to the crowd.
Nicely done. All right, Shannon, what's your Halloween treat?
So you're not going to believe me when I say the answer is Hack-O-Lantern. In all seriousness, truly one of my favorite things in the past maybe like 4 or 5 years that is a signal for me that Halloween is starting as the season, which for me it starts in like the end of August.
A little late, but I'll accept it.
My best friend, she won't be upset to hear me say this because she will for sure agree. She grew up incredibly repressed in the Christian school system, was not exposed to many pop culture anythings.
A real William Sterling type. Got it.
Right. And so a big chunk of our friendship over the years has been, I would make a reference to something. She would say, I don't know what that is. And I would say, cool, come over on Friday. I'm going to show you. And so it's been this educational experience, particularly growing up in a very religious environment, was definitely lack of access and exposure to scary media, horror movies, that sort of thing. So that's something that we do every Halloween is every weekend leading up to actually the end of October. She'll come over and it'll just be, okay, what have you never seen? What are we going to watch? And so showing her I think not even until last year, she had never seen Nightmare on Elm Street, right? One of my favorite memories in adulthood of the past few years has been Psycho was playing at a theater close to her. And I had mentioned how much I love Psycho. And she was like, oh, I don't know anything about that movie. And I was like, I mean, you've never seen it, but you surely know the story. And she goes, no, I don't know a single thing about it. And I said, oh, I mean, I'm sure you do without noticing. And she goes, I couldn't tell you a single fact about that movie. And so I said, I need to have this experience with you. And so we went to this theater at her hometown and walked in, and it was really funny. There was a lot of older folks there excited to see it and just chatting about the movie. And every time we walked a cloud of people, I would say, my friend's never seen Psycho. She doesn't know anything about it. Don't talk about it at all. Right. Because she had not culturally absorbed any of it. I was very excited. Everyone in the theater was very excited because I made everyone know my best friend has ever seen Psycho. She's got no idea what this movie is. And so we had sat down, watched the entire thing. And the whole time I kept thinking, oh, she's going to know the twist. She's going to figure this out. Modern film, sensibilities, she's going to know. But when we got the big, reveal at the end, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone. It's not
spoilers for Psycho.
Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
That is so awesome, getting to be the horror sommelier to someone and educating their palate. I remember studying Psycho, and we learned that when it was released, there was all these cultural taboos that Hitchcock set up and broke very early on. Two people on a bed, a woman's bra strap being visible, but because she went from a white bra to a black bra, he's like, no, it's her character. See, this character is getting darker. And then it all led up to this horrific, mind-shattering climax where he showed a flushing toilet, which was something that was not allowed in cinema. That had people like barfing in their popcorn and running out and pulling out their hair. And then they were like, all right, well, now it's just a whodunit. We can all relax and settle in for the second half of Psycho. Yeah, Hitchcock was a mad lad. And in fact, that brings me to my Halloween treat, pulling something off my shelf here.
Very Hitchcockian.
Alfred Hitchcock's Monster Museum, 12 shuddering stories for daring young readers. I was a young reader who dared, and these shivery delights absolutely blew my mind and made me the writer I am today. Total Halloween style trick-or-treat grab bag of genres and stories and lengths and eras. There's Guy Endore, there's Manly Wade Wellman, there's Ray Bradbury and Theodore Sturgeon. There's just like such a crazy mix of monsters and stories and genres. And this is the original book that I grew up reading and rereading. I just treasure it. Kayli, what are you working on next?
Well, right now I'm working on a book of short horror and horror adjacent stories. Got about a dozen written right now, and I'm just kind of plugging away at those. This November, my third book comes out called Yeehaw Junction through Moonstruck
Awesome.
Books.
William?
I've got a couple of things lined up for 2026, but I'm going to kind of leave them on the back burner to keep my focus on Punk Goes Horror for now. So Punk Goes Horror is coming out on March 11th.
Awesome. How about you, Shannon? What are you working on next?
Yeah, so I kind of spilled the beans a little bit on it earlier, but my current work in progress is a novel that is following essentially a cursed punk band told in like an epistolary style. We have, some firsthand narrative as well as reviews of the band and newspaper articles and interview clips. So kind of strewn together in a very DIY way to try to manifest the feeling that I'm kind of going for with this grungy band that's essentially doomed in the end.
Very cool. Kayli, where can people find you online?
I am on Instagram. My handle is Kayli Scholz, my name. That's the only place I am online. I also have a website, KayliScholz.com.
Shannon?
I'm also on Instagram. If you search for my name, Shannon Riley, it should come up. My actual handle is HEAUX_HOAX. It doesn't really, I guess if it has to be pronounced, it's ho-ho, because I've never actually tried to pronounce it. I'm also, unfortunately, over on Twitter still, and I have a Blue Sky. I believe my Blue Sky is, oh boy, I think it's Shannon. Oh boy, I should probably.
It can't be worse than ho-ho.
Shannon Riley is real. I actually don't know what I am over on Blue Sky. I'm not there very often, so
I would have to tear my tongue out to be able to pronounce my Blue Sky address properly. William, where can people find you online?
I am Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at this point. All of them are at spooky_Sterling.
And most importantly, where can people find Punk Goes Horror online?
If you want to help Bezos buy another super yacht, it is available for pre-order on Amazon. I highly don't recommend that, though. That's
not punk.
Not the punk thing to do. If you want to be super punk and go buy direct from the merch stand, I highly recommend going to truebornpress.com. On there, they have a shop that has some really cool stuff, including Metamorphosis by Ross Jeffrey, which just came out, and it's so good. Progeny by Kenya Moss Dime, and then Punk Goes Horror-wise. If you've listened to this whole episode and you're not quite sure if you get the vibes or if you're not quite sure if this anthology is for you, you can go on truebornpress.com and they have my demo tape up there. I wrote a story for my own open call because I'm a narcissist like that, I guess. But you can go on there. It's free. Download my demo, read the story. It gives you kind of an idea of what the stories in this anthology might be like. And then you can pre-order either just the straight paperback copy of the story on there, or Christina's putting together some sort of a deluxe backstage package that even I don't know all the details of that yet. But you can get either of those versions on there also of the actual anthology.
Well, guys, thank you for hanging out, and thanks for talking Punko's Horror.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and follow. We're now on YouTube. Links are in the show notes. You can find me at jeffccarter.com and hit the link to pick up my collection, We Bleed Orange and Black, 31 fun-sized tales for Halloween. Until next time, stay spooktacular.